Hello, and thanks for joining us at Kensington Mortgages for this Capital Markets Roundtable. In this flagship session, we'll be showcasing the innovative and impressive parts played by women in the Capital Markets Group. For that reason, we have the great benefit of Camille Boileau, Senior Vice President, Jasmine Hainan, Vice President, Yolanda Bushell, who this year's moved from an EA role to work within the Capital Markets team, and Nicole Popham-Holloway, who joined the Capital Markets team at Kensington in October this year. And Camille, if I can turn to you first, as Senior Vice President of the Capital Markets team, you're in a very good position to tell us exactly what the Capital Markets team does.
Capital markets is very vital for Kensington. We are not a bank, so we cannot rely on retail funding as like most of the banks that you know in the sector, HSBC, Barclays, or the challenger banks. The way we rely on funding is through securitization markets. So we raise fundings on the market, and these fundings raised is then lent to borrowers for the purchase of their homes. So this is very important for Kensington to ensure that the firm got access to capital markets on a very frequent basis, so they are able to structure these bonds and raise funding through the sale of bonds to bond investors.
Thank you very much indeed. Nicole, having previously worked for Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, RBS, and indeed the FSA in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So as we go around the table for introductions, tell us more about how that impressive background has influenced what you do now at Kensington.
I think I like to look at my career in sort of two distinct chapters. The first was in the early 2000s when I was fortunate enough to work at some wonderful companies who were right on the forefront of the securitization market as it was growing. Then the second chapter was after the crisis when the public securitization market shut down. And I decided to switch sides and actually go and work for the regulator. I think all the way through my career I always enjoyed dealing with the issuer side and the client interaction. And so I always thought that there was a piece of the puzzle that was sort of missing from my career. I was going to go and work on the issuer side. So I was very excited when the opportunity came to come and work at Kensington and try to see that my previous experience on sort of the different sides of the same industry can help to add to the team.
Thanks very much, Nicole. Yolanda, you've been at Kensington for 5 years, now working on the securitization programme and corporate ESG. Can you tell us more about how you're getting on in your new role at Capital Markets?
It's going really well, actually. So I've been at the company, and previously I was more in a support EA role, but as I worked within the Capital Markets team still in that role, I found I was doing or drawn to getting more involved in a lot more of what the team were doing. So as that progressed and a space came up in the team, I was able to move across, and I'm really enjoying it. It's really good to be learning again, learning about securitization, and also it's really good that there's different aspects that I can get involved in, like the side of ESG, and also like helping on the portfolio purchase and sales with Jasmine, and just all different aspects of capital markets.
Oh, you mentioned Jasmine. You're, of course, Vice President, joining Kensington in 2015. Tell us more about your role in the Capital Markets team.
So when I joined in 2015, that's actually when the Capital Markets team was sort of founded, when the two businesses that make up Kensington, which was previously Ascendant and Kensington, came together. So my role has very much evolved with the business. Initially, I was more involved in working with our third-party servicing clients, but through time, I worked on portfolio acquisitions, and now actually, as our strategy is changing, I've worked on portfolio sales. I'm also responsible for all the research that we put out. So we regularly put out publications on the mortgage market, whether those are newsletters. Pre-COVID, that was we also did a lot of in-person sessions, so we would do regular breakfast sessions with our investors where we would talk through whatever was going on in the market. And since the COVID crisis has started, we've started turning that into webinars.
Fantastic. Sounds like you're really moving with the times there, and a lot on. So talking of having a lot on, Camille, you go back to 2013 with Kensington as VP within Capital Markets. Tell us first about your role and how it's evolved since you started in the Capital Markets team. What have been the challenges throughout the years, would you say, Camille?
So I started in 2013. It was a very small team. It was just the two of us with Alex, who is still running the team actually. Kensington had not done any securitization since crisis. I think they probably had done one since the global financial crisis. So we had to resume the securitization program for the group. Took us a bit of time to kind of be more visible on the market, like gain some credibility, because Kensington has totally changed their business model. And yeah, my role has kind of evolved as in capital market, as being in charge of the securitization program, which is today Kensington is the most frequent issuer in the market. I've been working on 23 securitizations over the last 6 years, so it's been indeed like quite a busy role, coordinated like all of the various legacy and new origination securitization over the past 6 years, but indeed quite interesting, taking more and more responsibilities, getting to know more clients, investors, banks. So yeah, it's been quite an excited journey, and we'll see what the future looks like.
Cami, thanks very much. I want to just drill down now on your roles within Kensington's work in environmental, social and corporate governance, ESG of course. And Cami, staying with you, you've managed the whole ESG of the firm. Why is ESG so important to Kensington Mortgages, and how and when did Kensington start its ESG journey?
Kensington was already pretty advanced into ESG when I started to look into this topic. Obviously, working in capital markets, I needed to take care of the investor community as well and see how we could issue some ESG instruments. And that's what we've been doing, and I know we will be discussing that later on, because we've been quite a leader in the industry, issuing the first social and the first green bond in the UK ABS market. But on the top of that, obviously, we've also published some ESG targets, and we're quite proud to continue to develop ESG and ensure that ESG has a strong impact in every area of Kensington, including the lending and the servicing businesses.
As you say, Kensington really is something of a leader in this ESG space. Both yourself, Cami, and Yolanda have worked on another set of firsts that you mentioned there, the green and social bonds. Can we start with the social bond? Cami, what's the story behind the first social bond issued by Kensington, being also the first ESG bond issued by a UK RMBS issuer?
We looked into the social bond principle of ICMA to kind of find whether there was an angle to develop any social bonds within their framework, and it was kind of a natural validation of the Kensington business model, given Kensington is actually a UK mortgage lender focusing on underserved borrowers and product niches in the market. So we're looking at very high quality borrowers that are declined because they've got some income complexity in the market, and they come to Kensington to get manual underwriting because the main street banks just can't look at them because of their complex characteristics. So Kensington's been doing that since the crisis, since like 2012 actually, when the business started to resume its lending program. And yeah, the social bond was just like a natural validation of like the Kensington lending practices. So it was a very natural move for Kensington to issue this social bond, and we are hoping that social bond will form a clear part of our securitization programs in the year to come, and hopefully we can issue like once a year a social bond.
Let's talk now about the green bond, because Yolanda, you can tell us more about the Kensington journey to develop a green bond framework and how that's been received by the markets, bearing in mind, of course, that so far Kensington's raised £1 billion in sustainable bonds.
For us to come to the conclusion to raise a green bond is something we wanted to do, but it wasn't as a natural progression because the UK housing stock is only 11% rated A and B EPC, which is what are considered green buildings. So the way we had to go around it is we had to go for a use of proceeds approach. So we raised £640 million in our Class A tranche, which is the green bond. So we've committed to lending over the next 5 years on properties A and B, £640 million. The green bond was really well received by investors, and since we've produced our one, we've seen another similar transaction using the same approach in France, and we're hoping that we can see further green bonds in the future using this approach.
Thank you very much. And let's move on now to diversity and inclusion. And Jasmine, 50% of your team are female. Kensington has a really modern and inclusive policy towards women progressing their careers. But generally, how hard is it to be a woman in this very male-dominated space?
Well, as you say, our team is very unusual in that we are split pretty much 50-50. It does stand out that that's quite unusual on certain occasions. For example, when you attend an industry conference, you walk in and you realize that actually 95% of the people there are men. I think it's something that was probably more difficult for me earlier in my career when I was young, and you have to deal with the fact that you're inexperienced and a woman and walking into meetings where, it's mostly men. I think it's becoming, the industry as a whole is becoming more balanced.
And do you think that Kensington's played a part in, again, with this leadership? 50-50 is unusual. Do you think other people are taking up your ideas? Other companies within the space are saying, hey, look how well Kensington are doing. Perhaps it's a good idea to have more women in the business.
I think we're still fairly unusual in that we have that kind of split, particularly in senior positions. I think what you see more often is that there are a lot of junior women and more senior men, but actually with us it's very evenly split, and I don't think you really see that in many other companies like us, or certainly not in many capital markets teams.
And Yolanda, you're nodding away there, and you're a mother of two. How do you manage the juggling act?
Kensington has a great approach to flexible working that really helps, and even on a day when you're really busy, if you're at home, you can still put the children to bed and then go back to work. And also our boss is really supportive as well. So Alex is great. I've worked with him at another company previously, and I came to this company because I enjoyed working with him. So I think the combination of the two, it doesn't matter how much you've got going on at home or at work, you can manage to cope with both.
And Cami, you're also a mum and expecting a second child. Many congratulations for that. But how are you going to manage? And do you worry about taking a second career break?
The very small career break, I would mention, because it's generally taking like 6 months, and I'm probably going to take another 6 months. So I don't really see them as like a career break, but more like I'm going to miss some key projects within the firm. But I live very close by, so I'm probably going to pop up to the office, and we kind of a very close team because it's a very small team in capital markets. So I'm sure I'll know what will be going on in the firm for the next 6 months. So I'm not that worried too much, to be honest.
Okay, and can we just move on now to the pandemic, because there's not one person in the world that can say they've not been affected. So Jasmine, how did you go on in the pandemic? What were the challenges that you faced?
It was definitely very difficult at first because I had never worked from home before, and I was very used to coming in and seeing people face to face, and suddenly we were stuck at home. Like Camille said, we didn't have the setup to do that initially. I live alone, so it was actually quite isolating to suddenly have to do everything from home and everything over the phone. But a lot of positives have come out of it. My family lives abroad, so being able to work from home now means that I can actually spend a lot more time with them and work remotely from there. Occasionally, I got a dog during the pandemic, so that's something that wouldn't have been possible if I was in the office 5 days a week. I think what's come out of it is really a lot more positive than I would have expected at the beginning, because this flexible approach to working allows people to balance their life in a way that works for them.
Great. And what about you, Yolanda? How have you found lockdown and re-emerging from lockdown?
I've got 2 children, so working and looking after them was quite challenging. But then once everything reopened and they were back at school and nursery, it was pretty good. I think the main challenge for me was I started in my new role at the start of April, and I'm completely learning from scratch a whole new business. Even though I'd worked on different things with the team, I still had a lot to learn. So I think the most challenging bit was I wasn't around anyone else, whereas now we've slowly come back to the office. Now that I'm sitting next to my team members again, I can turn around and ask them something. I can quickly just overhear what someone's talking about and that relates to something that I'm working on. So I think that was the most challenging thing, just starting in a new position. And as much as I do like working from home, I actually really enjoy coming back to the office now.
And what about you, Nicole? Are you glad to be back in the thick of it, as it were?
Absolutely, it's been exciting coming into London again to go to the office. It's lovely to be able to have a combination of both, to be able to work from home, but then to come into the office and work with your team.
Let's stare into our crystal balls now and let's talk about the future. Against the background, of course, that the purpose of Kensington is, as passionate people, you want to help extraordinary people own their own homes where other lenders don't. So if I can come to you, Camille, you've, of course, spoken about the leadership in the ESG space in particular. What do you think is next for Kensington in this pioneering leadership role?
When the pandemic started, we all obviously have seen the negative of it. It's been 18 months now that this is there. Obviously, as we discussed, there is no flexible working, so that's one of the positive at the corporate level. But on the business model of Kensington, I'd like to see that this could actually bring some opportunities for the business, the pandemic, and some people that we generally lend to people that are underserved by the banks, and we may see more and more of these customers going forward. And I hope that Kensington is going to help serve better these social communities by continuing to lend loans to these people that have been more affected than others.
Camille, thank you. So opportunities to serve. Jasmine, where do you see the future going as far as Kensington is concerned?
I guess one thing that has changed or is certainly changing is the mortgage industry has always been very archaic, very paper-based, not very standardized, and a lot of that is changing, and I think the pandemic has accelerated that because obviously a lot more things need to be done online. So I think that's kind of a key change that we're seeing in the industry. Things are being done digitally online in a more standardized manner.
More digitalisation, more transformation. Thanks very much. Yolanda, where do you see the future?
Well, we have an ESG target that we've set ourselves within the capital markets team to produce at least 15% of sustainable principal-backed bonds over the next 3 years. So in the future, I can see us supporting more people purchase green properties, more social borrowers by issuing these bonds.
Great, thank you very much. And Nicole?
Our role in Kensington is to help to raise the funding that's necessary for the company. And I think looking to the future, we're going to be looking to grow our investor base, so trying to find new investors to broaden and diversify the investor base to be able to make that more sustainable going forward.
Great, thanks very much. And I have to ask you all, as very successful women in this business, in this male-dominated business, what advice would you give to any woman now wanting to start her career in the financial services industry?
Just go for it. Don't let the stereotypes hold you back.
To be confident, because there's a lot of opportunities to grasp in this financial industry for equally women and men. So we've got to be confident in the future. And I think the world is developing towards the right direction for us.
I would say don't be scared to go for opportunities that you find. This opportunity came up for me and I'm really happy. I was a bit worried about whether to go for it or not, but I'm really happy now that I did and I spoke up.
Good for you. Nicole?
I think that this is a great time for women to be joining the financial industry. I think the workplace as a whole has become a lot more flexible. They are allowing people to manage both having a family and having a career, and I think it's a brilliant time to join the industry.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this first Kensington Mortgages Capital Markets Roundtable. Camille, Jasmine, Yolanda and Nicole, many thanks for your insight, your hindsight and your vision. And thank you for listening.